Okay, now in this episode, welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner, episode number 39, or classic, like not classic, episode 39, of Marvel DC. In this episode, we briefly return to Spider-Man trivia back, or it's a Spider-Man story. This is Spider-Man the Gauntlet, Book 1, Electro and Sandman. It's here, eyebrows review it, and here it is. Sorry for this review being about a couple weeks late, but it's okay. Now, the stories in here are written by Dan Slott, Mark Waid, and Fred Van Lente. And the stories in here are Amazing Spider-Man 612 to 616, Dark Reign of Liz, Amazing Spider-Man number 1, and the Electro Origin story from Ultimate Spider-Man number 2. Now, Dan Slott just writes the list one-shot. It's actually a pretty good one-shot. Yeah. The first story is simply Peter Parker versus Norman Osborn. Yeah, it takes place during Dark Reign. It's a pretty good story, I give it that much. Artwork is good. The second story, unlike... I've only had one person complain about the artwork for the Amazing Spider-Man issue, which features Electro, of all things. Yeah. When it features Electro. But I think it's a pretty good story, yes. The Electro origin story is actually pretty good. It kind of does reminiscence basically what we're going to see in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, in this three-part story, it's simply... Oh, by the way, I like this artwork. This actually does feel like somewhat of a retro classic artwork. Now, it does basically show off who's going to be in the Gauntlet. Rhino, Sandman, Mysterio, Lizard, Kraven the Hunter, who at this time is still dead, and of course, Electro. Yes, Electro, of course, basically is upset at Daniel Bennett, of course, yeah, Daniel Bennett, basically, because he's got a bailout. Yeah, he actually got a bailout from the government, and yes, they decided to make this a story. Despite how controversial it is, he got himself a bailout and they made it into a story. Of course, the reminiscing about, also in this first part, basically, of somewhat of Spider-Man versus Electro over the years, mentioning Daredevil. Now, apparently at this time, Electro is somewhat dying. The powers are killing him. So he has the Mad Finger to fix him. And he kind of does. But he needs money to pay for the treatment, and he doesn't have any money. Also, for some odd reason, he stopped wearing his mask. And his starfish on his face. No explanation why that is. Yeah. And Electro likes Mad Finger consistent. Yeah. He does this thing for power to people. Yeah. This is by far a very odd story. But basically, Electro is actually a smart thing. He actually is protesting about the bailout. Yeah. But the one thing in particular that really is the biggest shocker of this entire story is in the final part of what Electro does to the Daily Bugle building. Something that's been a symbol in the pages of Spider-Man comics since Amazing Spider-Man number 1. And that is the destruction of the Daily Bugle building. Despite the fact the thing has been attacked many times over the years, attacked several times over the years, but this is the first ever attack that actually destroys the building. And of course, the reputation was falling apart anyways, and it was revealed in big time that after this, now, there is one thing I'm happy about the story. Daniel Bennett is gone. He's never seen again. He does get one offhand mention in the big time story arc, but he is never seen again. Nope, he never is. Which is actually pretty good. Now, Electro is hauled to jail for destruction of the Daily Bugle building, but he's freed by the Kravinoffs, Sasha, and the Chameleon. Yep, there's a short story called The Other Woman. It's a weird story. It has some of the most strangest artwork I've ever seen. It looks very kitty-ish. Now, next story I've heard has the artwork is actually pretty good for the story. And this is actually a story people actually wanted to see. The Return of the Sandman. And, yeah. It's just a two-part story. Carly is, of course, accused of something she's not committing. Yeah, and Betty Brant, for some odd reason, is cut her hair short. No explanation why that is. She usually has long hair. And she's somewhat out of a job. She's a blogger at this point. She does work for... She returns new Daily Beagle issues later. Yeah. And apparently Sam has revealed he's got a new ability. He can multiply himself. And he recognized his costume. That costume made his debut back in the 1970s in the very first issue of Marvel Team Up. Now, he's put in this costume a few times over the years, but he prefers his own outfit. He doesn't really put in this costume very much. The whole point of his costume is supposed to basically keep his powers in check. That's really the whole point of it. Yeah. Now, it's also revealed that this little girl named Prima Alvaro is actually apparently the Sandman's daughter. They never actually really confirmed this. It's hinted at it. Actually, it's mostly suggested. And in the end, Spider-Man actually does something wrong for a change. Yeah. He saw he was doing right. He actually does something wrong. So, in the end, Sandman disappears. He is hardly ever seen again. And she's taken to child services, and she's never seen it. She does get one offhand mention since then in the pages of Edge of the Earth. But otherwise, though, she doesn't get mentioned ever again. I'd like to see her come back. Sandman, of course, does not return again to the events of Origin of the Species. He disappears for some time. Electro, of course, does play a big part in the Gauntlet. Not just in the opening story, but all the way up to Grim Hunt. Otherwise, though, this is 5 out of 5. Okay? Now, as with some of my villains, I would like to see him fight besides the villains he did fight. Let's see. Well, they already had a little Green Goblin type thing part of the Gauntlet. That thing's to the list. I would like to see him take on the Enforcers. That would have been interesting. I would like to see him take on the original Vulture instead of the Red Vulture. Yeah. For some odd reason, they decided to use him. There is no explanation exactly why they decided to use that Vulture instead of the original Vulture. And also, Blackie Drago has not... I would like to see him make another brief return, at least acknowledge he's still there, because he's not been seen since Marvel Knight's Spider-Man number 11. But it's kind of nice the fact Electro's not wearing his mask anymore, because he's got the worst costume out of all the Spidey villains. He did change his costume briefly in the relaunch, where he was wearing his Chapter 1 costume. It's a bit better. But otherwise, though, he's never changed his costume over the years. And besides being part of the Sinister Six, he has also been part of the Frightful Four, but just for one story only. Otherwise, though, he never really stayed on very long on a team. Oh yes, he also formed the Emissaries of Evil. Now, most of the time he's fought Spider-Man over the years. But he did have a couple encounters with Daredevil, which, of course, he lost. As a matter of fact, Electro was his very first villain that Daredevil fought. Excuse me, that was before he fought his first original foe in the form of the Owl. That was way back in 1964. Otherwise, though, 5 out of 5 for this book. Really good book. I just wish they would really use other villains besides the ones they used. But Morbius in this Gauntlet makes no sense. Mr. Negative, yeah, he does make sense because he's a villain. I would like to see maybe Hammerhead make a return to the story, maybe Tombstone. But why in the world... Now, I'd like the fact that you're Juggernaut, but it would have been nice if they actually chose a better time to use him instead of simply just stick him in the Gauntlet. And this story has really ain't little to do with the Gauntlet at all. Otherwise, though, that's it. See you all in the next video, which is my 40th episode for this series. Okay? Bye.